You can't even cook soup with salt. What kind of wife are you? Useless in the kitchen, worthless as a woman, nothing but a burden in my house." Those were the merciless words a husband spat as his fists rained down on his wife. Blow after blow, all because of soup. But beneath it, years of cruelty, mockery, and disdain poured out of him like poison. She lay on the floor, blood in her mouth and tears in her eyes, wondering how the man she gave everything to could strip her of her dignity so easily. But sometimes the very moment they think you're broken is the moment destiny prepares your rise. Because what she did after that beating was something he never imagined. Something that changed everything. This is the story of a wife mocked, beaten and discarded, until the day her silence turned into power. And today, it is being retold by me. Hello family, welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please, subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten, and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, because together, we are not just telling stories, we are keeping hope alive. The steam from the pot rose slowly, filling the kitchen with the faint smell of tomatoes and onions. Emily stirred the soup again, tasting it quickly. It was plain. She knew it needed salt, but the jar was empty. She had planned to borrow from the neighbor tomorrow. Her heart raced anyway. Dinner was always a test with Daniel. If the taste was slightly off, he would frown. If the meat was not tender enough, he would sigh and shake his head. She had spent years trying to please him, but lately, nothing seemed good enough. "Dinner's ready," she called softly. Daniel walked in, dressed sharply as always, his tie loosened, his shirt still crisp. He carried himself like a man who owned the room. Everyone outside praised him, successful, charming, respectable. But at home his eyes carried something different. Impatience, irritation, and lately, something darker. He sat down, not even glancing at her. Emily served him the soup, her hands trembling. She prayed silently that he would eat without comment. Daniel lifted the spoon, blew gently and took the first sip. His expression changed instantly. He froze, lowered the spoon, and stared at her. "No salt?" His voice was sharp, almost mocking. Emily swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I ran out. I'll get some tomorrow." He chuckled bitterly, shaking his head. "You can't even cook soup with salt? What kind of wife are you?" Her chest tightened. She opened her mouth to explain, but his words came like knives. "Useless in the kitchen, worthless as a woman, nothing but a burden in my house." Before she could breathe, his hand shot across the table. The slap landed hard on her cheek. Her head whipped to the side, a burning sting spreading across her skin. Emily gasped, clutching her face. "Daniel!" He stood up so quickly his chair scraped the floor. His eyes blazed with something she had never seen before. He came around the table, his fists clenched. "You think I work all day to come home to this garbage?" His voice roared. "You can't even get one thing right." The first blow landed on her shoulder, then another across her arm. She stumbled back, hitting the counter. "Please, Daniel," she cried. "It's just soup. I'll fix it. But he wasn't listening. Years of contempt boiled over. Punch after punch, insult after insult. Emily collapsed to the floor, covering her head. Tears streamed down her face, her mouth tasted of blood. It was the first time he had ever hit her. And yet, in that moment, she realized something terrifying. It wasn't the soup. Her mind flashed back to earlier that week. She had been folding laundry when she noticed Daniel pacing in the living room, whispering on his phone. She heard the name, clear as day. Clara. That night, when he came to bed, she had asked softly, "Daniel, who is Clara? You keep calling her late at night." His body stiffened. He didn't look at her. He didn't answer. He just turned his back and muttered, "Don't ask me stupid questions." But his jaw had tightened, and his silence carried a weight she couldn't ignore. Now, as his fists rained down on her, Emily understood. Clara was the shadow between them. The soup was only an excuse. The hatred had been building ever since she spoke that name. She lay on the floor, trembling, her breath short. Finally, Daniel stepped back, panting. He looked at her as if she were nothing, then turned away. Without a word, he walked into the living room, picked up his phone, and dialed. Emily pressed her hand to her cheek, wincing in pain. She heard his voice from the other room, calm, tender, so different from the man who had just beaten her. "Good night, my queen," he whispered. "Sweet dreams, Clara." Emily stayed on the floor long after the sound of Daniel's voice faded into the bedroom. Her cheek throbbed, her lip bled, and her arms ached from trying to shield herself. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the ache in her chest. She whispered to herself, broken and trembling, "Why, Daniel? Why?" This wasn't the man she had married, at least not the man she thought he was. Back then he was kind, soft-spoken, protective, or maybe he was only pretending. Maybe the real Daniel had always been there, waiting for the right moment to show his face. She thought of the early days, when he held her hand in public, when he bought her flowers, when he promised her forever. Everyone envied her, saying she was lucky to have such a good man, and she had believed them. But little by little the signs began to show, the sharp comments about her cooking, the way he laughed at her accent when she spoke to his wealthy friends, the way he compared her to other women, always finding her less, always pointing out her flaws. And now, tonight, he had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Emily pulled herself up slowly, using the counter for support. Her knees shook beneath her, and she nearly slipped in the spilled soup on the floor. She grabbed a rag and began cleaning, her hands trembling, tears mixing with the drops of broth. Not because she wanted to clean, not because she cared about the soup, but because Daniel hated mess. If he came back and saw the floor dirty, she knew he would explode again. She wiped every drop, forcing herself not to sob too loudly. Then she dragged herself to the bedroom. The door was half open. Daniel lay on the bed, phone pressed to his ear, his voice soft and honeyed. "Yeah, baby. Of course I miss you. You're all I think about." He laughed quietly, a laugh that stabbed through Emily's chest like glass. "Good night, my queen. Sweet dreams, Clara." He ended the call and rolled over, his back facing her. Within minutes, his breathing slowed into sleep, calm as if nothing had happened. Emily stood there in the doorway, staring at him. Her lip quivered. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to wake him up and demand answers. But fear pressed down on her like chains. She slipped quietly into the bathroom instead, locking the door behind her. The mirror told her everything she didn't want to admit. Her cheek was swollen, her lip cut, a bruise already darkening on her arm. She touched her face gently and winced. Her reflection stared back at her, broken and ashamed. For the first time she wondered if her marriage was nothing but a prison. Her parents had warned her. "Daniel's family is not like ours," they had said. "He looks down on people. He will make you suffer." But she hadn't listened. She thought love was enough. She thought she could change him. Now she realized she was the one being changed. Slowly, piece by piece, Daniel was breaking her into someone she didn't recognize. She leaned against the sink and whispered again, "Who is Clara?" The name felt like poison in her mouth. Whoever Clara was, she had taken Daniel's heart. She was the reason for his disgust. The soup was only an excuse, a mask to hide the truth. Daniel hated Emily because someone else had replaced her in his life. Emily sat on the bathroom floor, hugging her knees, rocking herself silently as the night stretched on. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard his voice again. "Good night, my queen. Sweet dreams, Clara." She didn't know yet what she would do. She didn't know how far the betrayal went, or how deep the wounds would grow. But one thing was certain. Tonight was only the beginning. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love for you to join our community by hitting the subscribe button. Through our stories, we build hope and give a future to children and women who have been abused all over the world. Motivate us by subscribing and turning on your notification bell so you never miss a story that matters. Also, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from, and how did this story speak to you? The bruises on Emily's face had faded, but inside, the wound was fresh. Every time Daniel touched his phone, her chest tightened. Every time she heard it buzz at night, she thought of that name. Clara. Days passed, but Daniel never mentioned the soup again. He acted as if nothing had happened. That was his way. Pretend the violence never took place, shift blame, and move forward as if she were the problem for remembering. But Emily remembered. She remembered every word, every blow, every whisper of, "My Queen Clara." One evening, as she ironed his shirts, she caught a faint scent. Sweet, floral, expensive. Not hers. She didn't own perfume like that. She pressed the fabric to her nose again. The smell clung stubbornly, mocking her. Her heart sank. "Perfume," she whispered to herself. Daniel walked in just then. She quickly set the shirt aside. "Where's dinner?" he asked flatly. "Almost ready," Emily answered, forcing her voice steady. He didn't notice her trembling hands. He rarely noticed anything about her anymore. That night he claimed he had a business meeting. He wore the same shirt she had ironed, the one with the perfume scent. Emily watched him leave, her mind swirling. Business? At 9 p.m.? With perfume that didn't belong to her? She couldn't sleep. She lay awake, waiting for the sound of his car. At 2 a.m., headlights flashed across the window. He walked in humming softly, smiling to himself. He didn't even look guilty. The next morning, Sophie came by. "Emily," she said warmly, pulling her into a hug. Sophie smelled faintly of the same perfume. "I just thought I'd stop by and see you." Emily forced a smile. Sophie had been her friend since childhood. They had shared secrets, laughter, and tears. Sophie was the one who always told her to stay strong, the one who cheered her wedding the loudest. "Sit," Emily said softly, serving tea. Sophie took a sip and looked at her carefully. "You look tired. Is everything okay?" Emily hesitated, then asked, "Sophie, do you know anyone named Clara?" For a second, just a second, Sophie's eyes flickered. Then she smiled. "Clara? Number. Why?" "I heard Daniel say her name," Emily admitted. "Late at night, he called her." His Queen Sophie reached across the table, squeezing Emily's hand. "Emily, men say many things. Maybe you misheard. Don't let your imagination run wild. Daniel loves you. Be patient with him. Men have their moods." Emily nodded weakly, but inside, her suspicion deepened. Later that night, when Daniel fell asleep, she crept into the living room and checked his phone. His messages were locked, but one call history stood out. Clara, saved under a fake name. Dozens of calls, every day. Emily's heart pounded. Clara was real. Clara wasn't just in her head. But who was she? The answer came sooner than she expected. A week later, Emily attended a church event. She spotted Sophie across the hall, laughing with Daniel in a corner. He leaned in close, whispering something that made her smile. Sophie touched his arm lightly, the way only lovers do. Emily froze. Her stomach dropped. Clara wasn't a stranger. Clara wasn't some mysterious woman. Clara was Sophie. Sophie's middle name, the one she rarely used. Her closest friend, her confidant. The woman who sat in her kitchen and told her to be patient. Emily felt the room spin. Betrayal wrapped itself around her throat like a rope. She didn't confront them then. She couldn't. Her legs were shaking, her voice stuck in her chest. She turned and left quietly, tears blurring her vision. When she got home, she locked herself in the bathroom again, staring at her reflection. "Sophie," she whispered. "You." The knife of betrayal cut deeper than Daniel's fists ever had. The days that followed felt like a nightmare Emily couldn't wake from. Sophie still visited, smiling, laughing, hugging her as if nothing had changed. Every touch felt like poison, every word like a dagger wrapped in sugar. "Emily, don't look so sad," Sophie said one afternoon as she sat on the couch. "Cheer up. Daniel's a good man. Not perfect, but he loves you. Don't give up on him." Emily forced a weak smile, her hands gripping her skirt tightly. "Loves me? The same man who called Sophie my queen in the dark? The same man who looked at Emily like she was dirt under his shoes?" Every time Sophie spoke, Emily wanted to scream, but she bit her tongue. She couldn't reveal what she knew, not yet. One evening, Margaret, Daniel's mother, came over. She never needed an invitation. "Emily," she said sharply, walking into the kitchen without so much as a greeting, "why is this house so plain? My son deserves better. Look at this furniture, these curtains." "It's embarrassing," Emily swallowed, trying to stay calm. "I do my best, Margaret. Your best?" Margaret cut her off with a laugh. "Your best is nothing. You came from nothing. You should be grateful Daniel even looked at you. If he had listened to me, he would have married someone from a better family, someone with class. Not—" She glanced around with disdain. "This." Emily lowered her eyes. The words pierced her like arrows. She wanted to shout that this house wasn't Daniel's. It was hers, left to her by her father. But she stayed silent. Margaret thrived on arguments, and Daniel always took his mother's side. That night, as Emily cleaned the kitchen, Daniel walked in with his phone pressed to his ear. He didn't notice she was there. "Yes, baby," he whispered. "Don't worry. The house will be ours soon. I'm working on the papers. Once it's done, Emily won't matter anymore. She's just holding space until the transfer is complete." Emily froze, her blood turning cold. She pressed her back against the wall, straining to hear every word. On the other end of the line, Sophie's voice was clear. "Daniel, are you sure? It's her inheritance, isn't it? What if she refuses?" Daniel laughed softly. "She won't refuse. She's too weak, too scared. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her. And once the papers are signed, Emily's out of the picture." Emily's hands shook so violently she almost dropped the dish she was holding. Her heart pounded in her ears, drowning out the rest of the conversation. The betrayal was complete. Her husband wanted her gone. Her best friend wanted her life. And together, they were plotting to take the only thing her father had left her, the house she had grown up in, the only place that still felt like home. Emily sank to the floor after Daniel left the room, her body trembling. Silent tears rolled down her cheeks. Out of the picture. That was what Daniel called her. Not a wife, not a partner, not even a human being. Just an obstacle. Her heart broke all over again, but inside the cracks, something else began to grow. Not anger, not yet, but a quiet, dangerous strength. She whispered to herself, "If they think I'm weak, they don't know me at all." The days after Emily overheard Daniel and Sophie's plan were heavy and cruel. She carried the weight of that secret like a stone pressing against her chest. She wanted to confront him, to scream that she knew everything, but fear locked her tongue. One night, she gathered courage. As Daniel sat in the living room scrolling on his phone, Emily whispered, "Daniel, why are you doing this to me? Who is Clara really? Why is Sophie always here?" The air grew thick. Daniel's head turned slowly, his eyes narrowing. "What did you just say?" Her voice shook. "I heard you. I know you call Sophie by her middle name. I know what you're planning." In a flash, he was on his feet. His hand struck her cheek so hard she staggered back, crashing against the wall. "You dare spy on me?" he shouted, his voice like thunder. "You dare question me?" Emily's knees buckled. "Daniel, please!" His fists followed, blow after blow, each one fueled not by soup this time, but by fear that his secrets were slipping. "You're nothing but a nosy little rat," he snarled. "If you knew what was good for you, you'd keep your mouth shut." Her screams echoed through the night, but no neighbor came. She knew they could hear. The thin walls carried every sound, yet they chose silence. Curtains stayed drawn, lights stayed dim. Nobody wanted to get involved. By the time Daniel stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him, Emily lay on the floor, broken and gasping. She dragged herself up, tasting blood, her body sore. With trembling hands, she reached for her phone. She dialed her sister, hoping for comfort. "Mary," she whispered when the line connected. "He hit me again. I can't—" But her sister's voice was cold. "Emily, marriage is not easy. Don't shame our family by complaining. Endure, that's what a good wife does." The words pierced deeper than Daniel's fists. Emily bit back a sob. Even her family had turned their faces away. When Sunday came, she went to church with her bruises carefully covered in makeup. She sat quietly, her hands folded, her soul aching. The pastor's wife noticed her silence and asked gently, "Are you all right, Emily?" Emily hesitated, then whispered, "Please pray for me." "Things at home, they're hard." The woman smiled sadly. "A good wife endures. Be patient. Pray harder. God will change your husband." Emily nodded, tears burning her eyes. Everyone had the same answer: silence, endurance, patience. But what they called patience felt like death. She walked home that day with her head down, her heart heavy. Betrayed by her husband, betrayed by her best friend, betrayed by her family, betrayed by her church. She was utterly alone. But sometimes, loneliness becomes a teacher. That night, as Daniel slept, Emily sat in the dark, staring at her swollen reflection in a small mirror. And for the first time, her tears dried into resolve. If no one would fight for her, she would fight for herself. She picked up her phone again, not to call for help, but to record. She pressed record and whispered, "Day 1." Her silence would no longer be weakness. It would be a weapon. The next days passed quietly on the surface, but beneath, Emily was no longer the same. She moved through the house like a shadow, cooking, cleaning, serving, her face blank, her voice soft. To Daniel, it looked like surrender. To Sophie, it looked like defeat. But inside, Emily was sharpening her silence into a blade. Every time Daniel raised his voice, she slipped her phone under the table and pressed record. His insults, his threats, the sound of his fists against the wall when he raged, all of it was captured. Every time she patched her bruises with makeup, she photographed the marks first. Purple, red, yellow, proof written on her skin. And when Daniel left papers on his desk, she quietly took pictures with shaking hands. Bank records, property files, a forged signature here and there, her name written in handwriting that wasn't hers. Each night she tucked the evidence away, her heart racing. She lived in constant fear that Daniel would discover her secret. But fear was no longer her master. Fear had turned into fuel. Outwardly she played her part. She cooked his meals, smiled faintly when Sophie visited, lowered her eyes when Margaret mocked her poor roots. "You're lucky, Emily," Margaret sneered one afternoon as she sipped tea in Emily's kitchen. "My son is far too good for you. A man like him should have married someone better, someone like Sophie, not you." Emily kept her lips pressed shut, but her hands shook under the table. Margaret didn't know how close her cruel words were to the truth. Silence. That was Emily's armor now. Late one evening, Daniel returned home drunk, slamming the door. He muttered to himself about deals and papers and money. Emily sat quietly in the corner, sewing a torn sleeve. She kept her eyes down, her ears open. The phone on the table buzzed. The name glowed bright on the screen. Clara. Daniel answered with a laugh. "Hey, baby." He walked into the kitchen, not noticing Emily nearby. "I told you, don't worry. It's all under control." Sophie's voice came through clearly, sweet and sharp. "Daniel, I can't hide it much longer. I'm pregnant." The needle in Emily's hand slipped, pricking her finger. She froze, the tiny drop of blood trembling on her skin. Daniel didn't pause. He didn't gasp, didn't falter. His voice was calm, almost cold. "Good," he said flatly. "That makes everything easier." Once the house is sold, I'll finally be free of that dead weight. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Dead weight. That was what she was to him. Not a wife. Not a woman who gave him her youth, her trust, her heart. Just an obstacle to be removed. Her hands shook violently, but she pressed them into her lap, biting her lip to stay silent. If he knew she had heard, the beating would be worse than ever. Daniel ended the call and walked past her without a glance, humming under his breath, already planning his new life with Sophie. Emily sat in the darkness long after he went upstairs, her finger still bleeding, her soul burning. Her silence had teeth now, and one day soon, it would bite. The day came like a storm Emily had been waiting for. Daniel woke up early, whistling as he shaved. He wore his best suit, combed his hair neatly, and even sprayed his most expensive cologne. He looked like a man heading to victory. "Today's an important day," he said casually, adjusting his tie. "I don't want any nonsense from you. Stay home. Cook something decent for once." Emily lowered her eyes and nodded. "Yes, Daniel." He smirked, satisfied, and left without another word. But the moment the door closed, Emily's face hardened. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. The folder she had been preparing for weeks lay on the table. Photographs of bruises, recordings of his rages, copies of forged documents, bank records, every piece of truth she had collected in silence. She picked up the folder and whispered, "It ends today." Daniel arrived at the lawyer's office with Sophie by his side. She wore a flowing dress, her hand brushing against his arm like a queen claiming her king. They smiled at each other, confident, certain that Emily was already defeated. "This is it," Sophie whispered. "Once the papers are signed, we'll finally be free." Daniel grinned. She won't see it coming. Inside the office, the lawyer prepared the documents. "Mr. Turner, once your wife signs here, the property will be transferred as discussed." Sophie smirked. "And if she refuses?" Daniel chuckled. "She won't. She's too weak." Just then, the door swung open. Emily stepped in. She wore a plain dress, her face calm, her posture steady, but her eyes burned with quiet fire. Behind her came 2 police officers and a stern-faced lawyer carrying a large briefcase. Daniel's smile faded instantly. "What are you doing here?" Emily met his gaze without flinching. "Protecting what's mine." Sophie stood, her face pale. "Emily, this isn't—" "Don't," Emily cut her off coldly. She handed her folder to her lawyer, who began laying out the evidence on the table one by one. "Here are photographs of the bruises Mrs. Turner suffered at the hands of her husband," the lawyer said firmly. "Here are audio recordings of his threats and verbal abuse. Here are copies of forged documents where he attempted to falsify her signature for property transfer. And here," he paused, pressing play on a recording, "is proof of his affair with Sophie Miller, also known as Clara." The room fell silent except for Daniel's voice echoing from the recording. "Good night, my queen." "Sweet dreams, Clara." Sophie's face turned red. The lawyer's assistant stared in shock. Even the police officers exchanged disgusted glances. Daniel slammed his hand on the table. "This is nonsense! She's lying! She set me up!" Emily's voice was calm, steady. "I was silent, Daniel. You thought silence meant weakness, but silence was the storm preparing. That was the moment the mask cracked. The man the community admired, the charming, successful Daniel Turner, was gone. In his place stood a liar, a cheater, an abuser exposed under the light of truth. And Emily, the woman he had mocked, beaten, and betrayed, stood tall before him, no longer trembling. The silence in the lawyer's office was heavy, broken only by the hum of the ceiling fan. Daniel's face darkened, his jaw clenched as he realized the walls were closing in. "You can't prove anything," he spat. "You think anyone will believe you over me?" Emily's lawyer placed another document on the table. "Actually, Mr. Turner, the evidence speaks louder than your words. Here is the bank record showing your attempt to transfer Emily's inheritance. Here is the forged signature, clearly not hers. And here are multiple witnesses who have heard you speak to Sophie as Clara. Sophie's voice shook. Daniel, what is this? You said everything was under control. Daniel turned on her, his face twisted with anger. Shut up, Sophie. This is your fault. You should have stayed quiet. Sophie stepped back, her confidence crumbling. My fault? You told me she would never find out. You said she was too stupid to notice. Emily stood still, watching them tear into each other, her hands steady. For years she had been the silent one, the one pushed aside, ignored, humiliated. But now Daniel and Sophie stood exposed, their lies devouring them from the inside out. The police officer stepped forward. Mr. Turner, you are under investigation for assault and forgery. You will need to come with us. Daniel's eyes widened. You can't do this to me. I'm respected in this community. I'm a good man. Emily finally spoke, her voice quiet, but cutting. A good man doesn't beat his wife. A good man doesn't betray his vows. A good man doesn't steal from the woman who trusted him. Her words echoed through the office. Everyone fell silent. Daniel lunged forward, pointing a finger at her. You think you've won? You think anyone cares about your little bruises? You're nothing without me, Emily. Emily looked him straight in the eyes. For the first time in years she felt no fear, only strength. You hit me because of salt, Daniel, she said, her voice clear and strong. But today, I seasoned your lies with truth, and made you swallow them whole. The words struck him harder than any slap could. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He was finished. The officers took Daniel by the arms, leading him out. His protests faded into the hallway. Sophie stood frozen, her face pale, her reputation shattered. The woman who had once called herself Emily's friend now looked like a stranger drowning in shame. Emily, Sophie whispered. Please, let me explain. Emily turned her back on her. I don't need explanations from snakes. The lawyer gathered the documents, handing the folder back to Emily. Mrs. Turner, you've protected your inheritance. The property is legally yours. You are free to proceed with divorce papers whenever you're ready. For the first time in years, Emily felt her chest rise without weight. She breathed deeply, her body lighter, her spirit unchained. She walked out of the office into the sunlight. The air felt different, clear, sharp, alive. She could almost hear her father's voice in the wind, proud that she had defended what he left behind. People in the community would whisper about Daniel now. The man they admired had been unmasked as a fraud and a coward. Sophie would carry the mark of betrayal for the rest of her life. And Emily? She was no longer the trembling wife hiding bruises with makeup. She was the woman who had turned silence into a weapon. As she walked away from the building, her head held high, Emily whispered the lesson her pain had taught her. Silence is not surrender.
You call this food? Luke hissed across the dining room table, his voice dripping with disgust. His fork clattered against his plate as he pushed away the roast that looked perfect but tasted like it had been soaked in vinegar. My parents aren't strays, don't feed them scraps. I watched his mother, Vivian, force a smile while discreetly reaching for her water glass. His father, Evan, cleared his throat uncomfortably. Across from them sat Rebecca, Luke's co-worker, who I wasn't supposed to know was sleeping with my husband and her husband Tom, who had no idea he was sitting next to his wife's lover. The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. My 6 months pregnant belly pressed against the table edge as I stood slowly, my hands trembling just enough to make the performance believable. Luke's eyes burned into me, probably planning the lecture he'd give me later about embarrassing him in front of his family. But then I smiled. I didn't order this, I said quietly, just loud enough for everyone to hear. Luke's face went from red with anger to white with confusion. What do you mean you didn't order? I interrupted, placing both hands on the table and leaning forward slightly. I didn't order my husband to cheat on me while I'm carrying his child. I didn't order him to spend our baby's college fund on hotel rooms with his co-worker. And I definitely didn't order him to humiliate me at every family gathering for the past 3 months. The room went dead silent. Rebecca's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Tom's eyebrows shot up as he looked between his wife and Luke. Vivian gasped audibly, her hand flying to her chest. Sabrina, what are you talking about? Luke's voice cracked, but I could see the panic building behind his eyes. I reached under my chair and pulled out a manila envelope, thick with papers and photographs. I'm talking about the Grand Plaza Hotel. October 15th, 18th, and 22nd. $350 each night. I slid the first receipt across the table toward his parents. I'm talking about Chez Laurent, where you took Rebecca for her birthday while I was home with morning sickness so bad I couldn't keep water down. Rebecca finally found her voice. Tom, I can explain. Can you? Tom's voice was dangerously quiet as he turned to stare at his wife. Can you really explain why my wife's name is on hotel receipts with another man? This is insane, Luke stammered, starting to stand up. Sabrina, you're having some kind of breakdown. Pregnancy hormones. Sit down. The command came from his own father. Evan's usually kind face had turned to stone. Sit down and let her finish. I pulled out a photograph and placed it gently on the table. It showed Luke and Rebecca in an intimate embrace outside the Marriott downtown, her hand tangled in his hair, his mouth pressed against her neck. The timestamp read 3 days ago. Vivian made a sound like she'd been punched in the stomach. Oh Luke, how could you? Mom, it's not what it looks like. Then what does it look like, son? Evan's voice could have cut glass. Because it looks like you've been cheating on your pregnant wife with a married woman, spending your family's money to do it, and then coming home to treat Sabrina like garbage. I pulled out more evidence methodically, like laying cards on a poker table. Bank statements showing charges at expensive restaurants on nights Luke claimed to be working late. Screenshots of text messages I'd found on his laptop, with phrases like, can't wait to be free, and after the baby comes, everything changes. Hotel receipts going back 4 months. Tom, I said, turning to Rebecca's husband, I'm sorry you had to find out this way. But you deserve to know. Just like I deserve to know that my husband has been planning to leave me right after I give birth. Tom's hands were shaking as he picked up one of the photographs. His wife sat frozen beside him, tears streaming down her face. But I felt no sympathy for her. She knew exactly what she was doing when she helped destroy my marriage. This dinner, I continued, gesturing to the awful tasting food around us, was my way of giving Luke exactly what he's been giving me for months. Something that looks good on the surface but leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. Luke tried one more desperate play. Sabrina, please. Think about the baby. Think about our family. I laughed and the sound surprised even me. Our family? Luke, you stopped being part of this family the moment you decided Rebecca was more important than your wife and child. I placed my hands on my belly protectively. This baby and I will be just fine without you. Vivian stood up abruptly, tears in her eyes, and walked around the table to me. She pulled me into a gentle hug, careful of my belly. Sweetheart, I am so sorry. So sorry. Mrs. Johnson, you have nothing to apologize for. Yes, I do, she said firmly, pulling back to look at me. I raised him better than this. And I promise you, Evan and I will make sure you and our grandchild are taken care of, no matter what happens between you and Luke. Tom had stood up too, his face pale but determined. Rebecca, we're leaving. Now. Tom, wait. Now. He didn't even look at Luke as he guided his sobbing wife toward the door. Luke sat alone at the table, surrounded by the evidence of his betrayal, while his parents comforted the woman he'd tried to destroy. The perfect dinner I'd planned had done exactly what I'd hoped. It had exposed the truth and shown everyone exactly who Luke really was. I'll be staying at my sister's tonight, I announced, picking up my purse. Luke, I suggest you use the time to find a good lawyer. You're going to need one. As I walked toward the door, Vivian caught my arm gently. Sabrina, honey, whatever you need. Whatever you and the baby need. We're here for you. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Behind me, I could hear Luke finally breaking down, but I didn't turn around. I was done looking back. The door closed behind me with a quiet click, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. 3 weeks earlier, I thought my biggest problem was morning sickness and swollen feet. I was 6 months pregnant, working part-time from home as a UX designer, and trying to keep our small house running while Luke worked longer and longer hours at his IT company. Or so I thought. It started with little things that didn't quite add up. Luke coming home later than usual, claiming he was putting in extra hours to prepare for the baby. New cologne that I didn't recognize. A sudden interest in working out that had him leaving the house at 6 in the morning for the gym. I want to be in good shape when the baby comes, he'd said when I asked about the sudden fitness kick. I want to be able to keep up with a toddler. Seems sweet. Responsible even. I ignored the voice in my head that whispered that Luke had never cared about fitness before, that he'd always preferred video games to exercise. The first real red flag came when our credit card statement arrived. Luke usually handled the bills, but I'd been trying to take on more financial responsibility before the baby arrived. I wanted to make sure we were budgeting correctly for diapers, formula, childcare. That's when I saw the charges. Chez Laurent, $180. I'd never been to Chez Laurent. Luke claimed to be eating gas station sandwiches during his late work nights. The Grand Plaza Hotel, $350. We lived 20 minutes from his office. Why would he need a hotel room? Victoria's Secret, $200. I hadn't received any gifts from Victoria's Secret. When I brought it up to Luke that evening, he barely looked up from his laptop. All those. Yeah, the hotel was for a work conference. I told you about that, remember? And the Victoria's Secret was for you, but I returned it because I wasn't sure about the size. I didn't remember him mentioning a work conference. And there was no credit showing a return from Victoria's Secret. What about Chez Laurent? Client dinner. Big account. Really important for my promotion chances. His answers came too quickly, too smoothly. Like he'd been practicing them. I let it go that night, but I started paying attention. Really paying attention. Luke's phone, which used to sit casually on the kitchen counter, now never left his side. When it buzzed with notifications, he'd check it immediately and then quickly put it face down. He started showering as soon as he got home from work, every single day. I feel gross after being in the office all day, he'd explain. But Luke had never been particularly concerned about office germs before. The gym visits became more frequent. Early mornings, sometimes evenings too. I'm really getting into this fitness thing, he'd say, but he never looked any different. No muscle gain, no weight loss, no improvement in stamina. 2 weeks before the dinner, I made a decision that changed everything. I hired a private investigator. I found Patricia Chong through a Google search at 2 a.m. when I couldn't sleep. Her website was professional but discreet, and her reviews mentioned her sensitivity with domestic cases. When I called her the next day, she didn't make me feel crazy or paranoid. Trust your instincts, she said during our phone consultation. If something feels wrong, there's usually a reason. I gave her Luke's schedule, his license plate number, and a recent photo. Within 48 hours, she called me back. Mrs. Henderson, I think you should come to my office. There are some things you need to see. My hands shook as I drove to her downtown office. Part of me still hoped I was wrong, that Luke really was just working hard and trying to get in shape. That I was being a paranoid, hormonal pregnant woman. Patricia's office was small and tidy, with a large desk covered in manila folders. She gestured for me to sit across from her. I'm sorry, Mrs. Henderson. Your instincts were correct. She slid a series of photographs across the desk. Luke's car parked outside the Grand Plaza Hotel. Luke walking into Chez Laurent with a tall, elegant woman with auburn hair. Luke and the same woman kissing passionately in the hotel parking lot. Her name is Rebecca Torres, Patricia said gently. She works at your husband's company in the marketing department. She's also married. I stared at the photos, feeling like I was looking at pictures of a stranger. This couldn't be my Luke, the man who'd rubbed my feet when they were sore, who'd assembled the crib in our spare bedroom with such excitement. How long? I whispered. Based on the credit card charges you showed me, at least 4 months. Possibly longer. 4 months. I was 2 months pregnant when it started. While I was dealing with morning sickness and fatigue, while I was worried about our finances and our future, Luke was whining and dining another woman with our money. There's more, Patricia said carefully. I was able to get some information from your husband's social media activity. He's been messaging friends about feeling trapped and looking forward to making changes after the baby is born. She showed me screenshots of Facebook messages between Luke and his college buddy Justin. Messages about how marriage was harder than expected and how he was figuring some things out. Messages about how he'd made some mistakes but was working on an exit strategy. An exit strategy. While I was growing his child, he was planning his escape. Mrs. Henderson, I need to ask you something important, Patricia said. What do you want to do with this information? I looked at the photographs spread across her desk. Luke feeding Rebecca dessert at an expensive restaurant. Luke's hand on Rebecca's thigh in his car. Luke kissing Rebecca like he used to kiss me. I want to destroy him, I said quietly. But I want to do it smart. Patricia nodded. Then we need to get you more evidence. Bank records, more photographs, documentation of everything. If you're going to divorce him, you want to make sure you get everything you're entitled to. No, I said, an idea forming in my mind. I want to do something else first. I told her about the family dinner Luke had been pushing for, how he'd been complaining that I never cooked for his parents anymore, how he wanted to show off our perfect little family before the baby came. I want to expose him publicly, in front of everyone who matters to him. His parents who think he's the perfect son. Rebecca's husband who has no idea what his wife is doing. I want them all to see exactly who Luke Henderson really is. Patricia raised an eyebrows. That's not usually how I advise my clients to handle these situations. I don't care about usual, I said, standing up and gathering the photographs. I care about justice. And I want everyone to know the truth. As I drove home that afternoon, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Purpose. Luke thought he was so clever, playing his double life, keeping everyone in separate boxes. But he'd underestimated me. He'd forgotten that I was a designer, that I knew how to plan projects and execute them flawlessly. He was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The next week turned me into someone I didn't recognize. While Luke was at work, or the gym, I became a detective in my own home. I had Patricia's evidence, but I wanted more. I wanted everything. I started with his laptop. Luke had always been careless about passwords. He used the same one for everything, our wedding date followed by his birth year. I waited until he left for his morning workout, and opened his laptop at the kitchen table. His email was a goldmine. Hotel confirmations dating back 6 months. Restaurant reservations for 2 at places I'd never heard of. But the worst part was the messages to Rebecca. Can't wait to start fresh after everything settles down. You make me remember who I used to be before all this responsibility. Sabrina doesn't suspect anything. She's too focused on the pregnancy to notice what's going on. Only a few more months and we can stop hiding. I screenshotted everything, my hands trembling with rage. 6 months of lies, 6 months of planning his exit while I planned our nursery. The browser history was even worse. Luke had been researching divorce lawyers, reading articles about custody arrangements, looking up apartment listings in the part of town where Rebecca lived. He'd been planning this for months while holding my hand at doctor's appointments and talking about baby names. I found his text messages next. Hundreds of them with Rebecca, some so explicit they made my stomach turn. But others were more devastating in their casual cruelty. Rebecca, do you think she knows? Luke, no way. She's completely clueless. Too busy nesting to pay attention to anything else. Rebecca, I feel bad sometimes. Luke, don't. This isn't about hurting her. This is about us being happy. Rebecca, what about the baby? Luke, I'll do my part financially. But I'm not going to let one mistake trap me in a marriage that isn't working. One mistake. That's what he called our child. A mistake that was trapping him. I had to run to the bathroom to throw up, and it wasn't morning sickness this time. When I composed myself, I kept digging. Luke's social media messages revealed more of his mindset. He'd been complaining to friends about me for months, painting himself as the victim of an accidental pregnancy and a clingy wife. She's changed so much since she got pregnant. All she talks about is baby stuff. I feel like I'm living with a stranger. I'm only 30. I'm not ready to be tied down like this. I made a mistake marrying so young. Now I'm stuck. The worst part was that some of his friends were encouraging him, telling him he deserved to be happy, that he shouldn't sacrifice his dreams for a trapped baby. I printed everything. Screenshots, email chains, text message threads, browser history. I organized it all in manila folders like Patricia had shown me. But I wasn't done. I wanted to know about Rebecca Torres too. A quick Facebook search revealed that Rebecca was 28, married to Tom Torres for 3 years, and worked in Luke's marketing department. Her profile was full of happy couple photos with Tom beach vacations, anniversary dinners, cozy nights at home. She looked so normal. Pretty but not stunning, friendly but not remarkable. She could have been any woman in any office in any city. There was nothing special about her that would explain why Luke was willing to destroy our family. But then I found her Instagram and everything clicked into place. Rebecca's Instagram was everything mine wasn't. Adventure photos from expensive trips. Professional photos of her in designer clothes. Pictures of her at trendy restaurants and rooftop bars, always looking effortlessly glamorous. She represented the life Luke thought he was missing. The freedom, the spontaneity, the lack of responsibility. I was the reality, the mortgage payments, the doctor's appointments, the future filled with diapers and sleepless nights. She was the fantasy, the escape from adult responsibilities disguised as romance. I found Tom's social media too. He seemed like a genuinely nice guy. Photos of him volunteering at animal shelters, posts about his job as an elementary school teacher, proud pictures of Rebecca at work events. He clearly adored his wife and had no idea she was living a double life. Looking at his innocent posts about their upcoming anniversary dinner made my chest tight with sympathy. He deserved to know the truth too. The final piece of my investigation came from our bank records. I'd always let Luke handle most of the finances, but I had access to all our accounts. What I found made my blood boil. Luke hadn't just been spending our money on his affair. He'd been systematically draining our baby's college fund. The account that both sets of parents had contributed to, that we'd been adding to every month since we found out I was pregnant. $8,000 gone. Spent on hotels, dinners, gifts for Rebecca, and a weekend trip to wine country that Luke told me was a work retreat. Our emergency fund was nearly empty too. Money I'd been carefully saving from my freelance work, money we'd need for maternity leave and medical bills. Luke had been treating it like his personal entertainment budget. I sat at our kitchen table, surrounded by evidence of my husband's betrayal, and felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp and constant. But underneath it was something harder, more focused. Luke thought I was too focused on the pregnancy to notice anything else. He thought I was completely clueless. He was about to learn how wrong he was. I called Patricia that afternoon. I have everything I need, I told her. Photos, messages, bank records, everything. But I want to add something to the plan. What did you have in mind? I want Tom Torres at that dinner, Rebecca's husband. He deserves to know the truth, and I want him to find out the same way everyone else does. That's risky. If he reacts badly. He's an elementary school teacher, Patricia. The worst thing he'll do is cry. But he deserves to know that his wife is cheating on him with my husband, using his money to fund their affair. There was a pause. How do you want to approach him? I'm going to call him. Pretend I'm Luke's wife, which I am, and invite him and Rebecca to a couple's dinner. I'll tell him Luke suggested it as a way to bring the work team closer together. And you think he'll come? I looked at his Facebook. He's been posting about wanting Rebecca to be more social with her coworkers. He'll think it's sweet that Luke is making an effort. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Mrs. Henderson, are you absolutely sure about this? Once you do this, there's no going back. I looked around our kitchen, at the refrigerator covered with ultrasound photos and baby name lists, at the high chair Luke's parents had already bought sitting in the corner. Patricia, there's already no going back. Luke made that choice 6 months ago. I'm just making sure everyone knows it. After I hung up, I sat in the silence of our house and planned the perfect dinner party. It would look beautiful, taste terrible, and reveal the truth to everyone who mattered. Luke wanted to show off our perfect little family. Instead, he was going to watch his perfect little lies fall apart in front of everyone. And I was going to enjoy every minute of it. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. Luke was still asleep beside me, and for a moment I studied his face, the face I'd fallen in love with, the face that had lied to me for months while I carried his child. He looked peaceful, innocent even. But I knew better now. I slipped out of bed carefully and went to the kitchen to start my day. The first step was the phone call to Tom Torres. I found his number through Rebecca's emergency contact information at Luke's company, a detail Patricia had helped me obtain. My hands shook slightly as I dialed, but my voice was steady when he answered. Hello, this is Tom. Hi Tom. This is Sabrina Henderson, Luke's wife from the IT department. I hope you don't mind me calling, but Rebecca gave Luke your number. Oh hi. Rebecca mentions Luke sometimes. Nice to hear from you. He sounded genuinely friendly, which made my chest tighten with guilt. But not enough guilt to stop me. Luke had this wonderful idea for a dinner party at our house. He really wants to build stronger relationships with his coworkers, especially since we're expecting our first baby. He suggested inviting you and Rebecca over for a home-cooked meal. That sounds lovely. Rebecca is always saying she wishes she could be more social with the people from work. When were you thinking? How about Saturday evening? Around 6. Nothing fancy, just a nice dinner with Luke's parents too. They love meeting the people he works with. I'll check with Rebecca, but I'm sure we'd love to come. Should we bring anything? Just yourselves? I'm really looking forward to meeting you, Tom. Luke speaks so highly of both of you. The lie tasted bitter in my mouth, but it was necessary. Great. We'll see you Saturday then. And congratulations on the baby. Thank you so much. See you Saturday. I hung up and immediately called Vivian, Luke's mother. Sabrina, honey, how are you feeling? How's my grandbaby doing? We're both doing well, thanks. I was calling to invite you and Evan to dinner Saturday night. Luke's been wanting to have a nice family dinner, and I thought it would be good to have everyone together before the baby comes. We'd love to come. Should I bring my famous apple pie? That would be perfect, Vivian. And I'm inviting one of Luke's coworkers and her husband too. Luke really wants to show off his family. How sweet. He's always been so proud of you, Sabrina. You're lucky to have each other. If only she knew. With the guests confirmed, I moved on to the most important part of my plan, the menu. I wanted the food to look absolutely perfect but taste awful. It had to be bad enough to make Luke angry and humiliate me publicly, but not so obviously tampered with that anyone would suspect sabotage. I spent hours researching recipes online, looking for ways to ruin food that would look normal. Salt instead of sugar in desserts. Too much vinegar in salad dressing. Baking soda instead of baking powder in bread. Fish that was just slightly past its prime. For the main course, I decided on a beautiful roast beef with herbs and vegetables. It would look impressive, but I'd marinate it in a solution that would make it incredibly tough and flavorless. The vegetables would be either undercooked or overcooked, seasoned with combinations that looked right but tasted wrong. The salad would be gorgeous mixed greens, colorful vegetables, elegant presentation, but the dressing would be so acidic it would make people pucker. The bread rolls would look golden and perfect but would taste like cardboard thanks to the wrong leavening agents. And for dessert, Vivian's apple pie would be the only thing that tasted good, which would make my failures even more obvious. I made detailed shopping lists and timeline charts, approaching this dinner party with the same methodical planning I used for my design projects. Every detail had to be perfect. But the food was only part of my plan. I also had to prepare my evidence presentation. I bought a large manila envelope and organized everything chronologically. Bank statements showing the progression of spending on his affair. Hotel receipts starting from 6 months ago. Screenshots of text messages and emails arranged to tell the story of his deception. The photographs Patricia had taken were the centerpiece, clear, undeniable proof of Luke's relationship with Rebecca. I selected the most damning ones and put them in order from least to most intimate. I also printed out Rebecca's social media posts from the time she was supposedly with Luke. Pictures of expensive meals that matched our credit card statements. Check-ins at hotels on the same dates as Luke's business conferences. Everything told the same story. My husband and his co-worker had been having an elaborate affair, funded by our family's money, while I was pregnant with his child. The hardest part was acting normal around Luke for the rest of the week. He came home every evening, kissed my cheek, asked about my day and discussed baby preparations as if nothing was wrong. I was thinking we should get the nursery painted this weekend, he said Wednesday night over dinner. Actually, I invited your parents over for dinner Saturday. And Rebecca from your work and her husband. I thought it would be nice to have everyone together. Luke froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. Rebecca? Why Rebecca? You're always talking about how great she is to work with. I thought it would be nice to meet her. Her husband Tom seems really sweet too. I watched Luke's face carefully. Panic flashed in his eyes for just a moment before he controlled it. I didn't know you were planning a dinner party. I might have to work Saturday. On a Saturday? That seems unusual. Big project deadline. You know how it is. Well, I already invited everyone. Your parents are excited to meet your coworkers. I'm sure your boss would understand if you need to leave work a little early for a family dinner. Luke pushed his food around his plate, clearly thinking fast. What are you planning to cook? A roast with vegetables. Salad. Bread. Nothing too complicated. Maybe we should just order catering. You know, with you being pregnant and all. Luke, I'm 6 months pregnant, not disabled. I can handle cooking dinner for 6 people. He didn't argue further, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was probably trying to figure out how to warn Rebecca without making it obvious. Thursday evening, he claimed he had to work late again. I knew he was really meeting Rebecca, probably telling her about the dinner, trying to figure out how to handle having her husband and his parents in the same room. Let them worry. Let them try to plan their way out of this. It wouldn't matter. Friday night, Luke tried one more time to derail the dinner. Sabrina, are you sure you're up for this? You've been tired lately. Maybe we should postpone. I feel fine, Luke. Everything's already planned. The roast is marinating, your parents are bringing pie, Tom and Rebecca are excited to meet everyone. It's going to be wonderful. He went to bed early, claiming he had a headache. I lay awake beside him, listening to his breathing, thinking about all the nights he'd come home late with excuses about work and overtime. Tomorrow night, the lies would finally catch up with him. Saturday morning, I got up early and started cooking. Everything had to look perfect, smell perfect, and photograph beautifully for the disaster it was about to become. As I seasoned the roast with combinations that would make it nearly inedible, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Power. For 6 months, Luke had controlled the narrative of our marriage. He'd made decisions without me, spent our money without permission, planned our future without my input. Tomorrow night I would be in control. Tomorrow night, everyone would see exactly who Luke Henderson really was. And I couldn't wait. Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather, sunny and crisp, the kind of day that made everything seem possible. I woke up before Luke, my mind immediately jumping to the dozens of tasks I needed to complete before our guests arrived. Luke was still sleeping, and for a moment I watched him, trying to remember when I'd stopped trusting the man next to me. When had his face started looking like a stranger's? I slipped out of bed and went straight to the kitchen. The roast had been marinating overnight in my special blend of ingredients that would make it look beautiful but taste terrible. I pulled it out of the refrigerator and smiled at how professional it looked, herbs coating the surface, the meat a perfect color. No one would suspect that the marinade contained twice the normal amount of salt and enough vinegar to make it nearly inedible. While the roast went into the oven, I started preparing the vegetables. Carrots that I'd cut beautifully but would roast until they were mushy. Green beans that would be so undercooked they'd crunch unpleasantly. Potatoes that looked golden and perfect but were seasoned with bitter herbs and combinations that would make people's faces scrunch up. The bread dough was rising on the counter. It would produce rolls that looked bakery perfect but tasted like cardboard thanks to my careful substitution of baking soda for baking powder. Luke wandered into the kitchen around 9, already dressed in his weekend clothes. "Something smells good," he said, but his voice was tight with tension. "Thanks. I want everything to be perfect for your parents and co-workers." He poured himself coffee with shaking hands. "Sabrina, about tonight." "What about it? Maybe this isn't the best time for a dinner party. You've been stressed lately, and with the pregnancy." "Luke, stop." I turned from the stove to face him directly. "Your parents are excited to come. Rebecca and Tom are looking forward to meeting everyone. Everything is planned and cooking. We're having this dinner." He opened his mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. "Okay. Is there anything I can do to help? You can set the table. Use the good china. I want everything to look nice." For the next few hours, Luke moved around the house like a caged animal. He set the table 3 times, rearranging the place settings each time. He cleaned the living room twice. He kept checking his phone and putting it down quickly when he caught me looking. Around noon, his phone buzzed with a text. He read it and immediately went pale. "I have to run out for a minute," he said. "We're out of wine." "We have wine. That bottle your dad brought last month. We should have more than 1 bottle. For 6 people." He was gone for 2 hours. I knew he wasn't just buying wine. He was meeting Rebecca, trying to figure out how to handle the evening. Let them plan all they wanted, it wouldn't save them. While he was gone, I put the finishing touches on my evidence presentation. I arranged everything in the manila envelope in perfect order, like a prosecutor preparing for trial. Bank statements, hotel receipts, photographs, text message screenshots. The story of their affair told through documentation. I also prepared a backup plan. If Luke somehow managed to avoid complete humiliation, I had Patricia's business card ready to give to Tom. He deserved to know the truth about his wife, even if the dinner didn't go exactly as planned. Luke returned with 3 bottles of wine and a bouquet of flowers. "For you," he said, handing me the flowers. "For being such a good hostess." The flowers were beautiful white roses and baby's breath, the kind of bouquet you'd give someone you were trying to apologize to. Or someone you were about to hurt. "They're lovely, Luke." "Thank you." I put them in a vase and placed them on the dining room table, next to the place settings he'd arranged so carefully. Everything looked perfect, like a magazine spread of the ideal family dinner. By 4 o'clock the house smelled incredible. The roast was browning beautifully, the bread rolls were golden and perfect looking, and I had changed into a navy blue maternity dress that made me look elegant and put together. Luke had showered and put on his best button-down shirt and slacks. He looked handsome and nervous, like he was about to take an important test he hadn't studied for. "The house looks great," he said, fidgeting with his collar. "You look beautiful." "Thank you." I smoothed my dress over my belly. "Our baby is being very active today. I think he's excited about meeting his grandparents and Daddy's friends." Luke's face went white at the word, Daddy. He knew that in a few hours, his role as a father would be very different than it was now. At 5:30, I started the final preparations. The salad got its special dressing beautiful to look at, but so acidic it would make people's mouths pucker. The vegetables went into serving dishes where they looked colorful and appetizing despite their awful seasoning. "Sabrina," Luke said quietly, "I need to tell you something." My heart jumped, but I kept my voice calm. "What?" I love you." You know that, right? Whatever happens, I want you to know that I love you and the baby. It was the first time he'd said those words in months and they felt like a slap. Too little, too late, and probably not even true. I love you too, Luke, I lied smoothly. That's why tonight is so important to me. I want everyone to see what a wonderful family we are. He looked like he might be sick. At exactly 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. That'll be your parents, I said, wiping my hands on my apron. Can you let them in? I just need to check on the roast. Vivian and Evan arrived with their usual warmth, Vivian carrying her famous apple pie and Evan holding a bottle of champagne. For toasting the new grandbaby, Evan said, kissing my cheek. You look radiant, sweetheart. Thank you, Evan. Everything smells wonderful, doesn't it? It really does, Vivian said, heading toward the kitchen. What can I do to help? Everything's under control. Just sit and relax. Your guests tonight. At 6:15, the doorbell rang again. Through the window I could see Rebecca and Tom walking up our front path. Rebecca looked nervous, constantly smoothing her hair and adjusting her dress. Tom looked excited and happy, carrying a bottle of wine and what looked like a small gift. My heart pounded as Luke opened the door. Rebecca. Tom. So glad you could make it. I watched Luke's face as he shook Tom's hand and kissed Rebecca's cheek the same way he'd greet any coworker and her spouse. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the forced nature of his smile. Tom, Rebecca, this is my wife Sabrina, Luke said, his voice slightly higher than usual. Tom stepped forward immediately, his hand outstretched and a genuine smile on his face. Sabrina. It's so wonderful to finally meet you. Luke talks about you all the time at work. I shook his hand, studying his face. He seemed like exactly the kind of man who would trust his wife completely, who would never imagine she was capable of betrayal. His eyes were kind behind wire-rimmed glasses, and his handshake was firm and warm. It's lovely to meet you too, Tom. And Rebecca, I've heard so much about you. Rebecca's smile was tight and didn't reach her eyes. Thank you for having us. Your home is beautiful. She was prettier in person than in the photographs, but she looked terrified. Her eyes kept darting to Luke, to Tom, back to Luke again. Come in, I said, playing the perfect hostess. Let me introduce you to Luke's parents. I led them to the living room where Vivian and Evan were sitting with glasses of wine. The introductions went smoothly, everyone making polite conversation about work in the neighborhood and my pregnancy. Tom was especially charming, asking thoughtful questions about the baby's due date and sharing funny stories about his students. He clearly adored children, and I could see Vivian and Evan warming to him immediately. Rebecca sat quietly, contributing little to the conversation, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Every few minutes she'd glance at Luke, some kind of silent communication passing between them. Well, I announced after everyone had their drinks, dinner should be ready in just a few minutes. Tom, would you mind helping Luke with the wine? As the men headed to the kitchen, I excused myself to check on the food. Everything looked absolutely perfect. The roast was beautifully browned, the vegetables were colorful and appealing, the bread rolls were golden and inviting. No one would suspect that it would all taste terrible. Luke appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face pale. Sabrina, can I talk to you for a second? Of course. What's wrong? He glanced back toward the living room, then stepped closer and lowered his voice. This is weird, don't you think? Having Rebecca and Tom here with my parents? Why would it be weird? They're your coworkers. Don't you want your family to meet the people you work with? It's just, Tom seems really nice. And my parents like him. It feels wrong to, he stopped abruptly. Wrong to what, Luke? Nothing. Never mind. Let's just get through dinner. He turned to leave, but I caught his arm. Luke, is there something you need to tell me? About work, maybe? About Rebecca? For a moment I thought he might confess everything. His eyes filled with something that looked like panic, and his mouth opened like he was about to speak. But then Tom appeared in the doorway. Sorry to interrupt, but Rebecca was wondering if there's anything she can do to help. That's so sweet of her, I said, not taking my eyes off Luke's face. But everything's under control. Luke was just telling me how much he enjoys working with Rebecca. Tom beamed. She's always talking about what a great team they make. I'm so glad she has such good colleagues. Luke looked like he might throw up. Well, I said brightly, let's get this dinner served, shall we? I can't wait for everyone to try my cooking. As we carried the dishes to the dining room, I felt a surge of anticipation. Everything was in place. The food looked perfect but would taste awful. All the key players were seated around our table. The evidence was ready in the kitchen. Luke took his seat at the head of the table, looking like a man about to face a firing squad. Rebecca sat across from Tom, her hands shaking slightly as she unfolded her napkin. Vivian and Evan were chatting happily with Tom about his teaching job, completely unaware that the pleasant family dinner they expected was about to turn into something very different. I served the first course, the beautiful salad with its terrible dressing, and watched as everyone took their first bites. The show was about to begin. "This looks absolutely gorgeous, Sabrina," Vivian said, admiring her salad. "You've really outdone yourself." Everyone picked up their forks and took their first bites simultaneously. I watched their faces carefully, fighting to keep my expression neutral. Tom was the first to react. His eyebrows shot up in surprise and he reached quickly for his water glass. But he was too polite to say anything negative. Evan's face scrunched slightly at the acidic bite of the dressing, but he continued eating with determination. Rebecca managed to swallow her first bite, but I saw her discreetly push lettuce around her plate to avoid taking another. Luke took one bite and immediately knew something was wrong. His eyes met mine across the table with a look of confused panic. "How's everyone's salad?" I asked sweetly. "It's very flavorful," Tom said diplomatically, taking another small bite followed immediately by more water. "I'm trying a new dressing recipe," I explained. "I wanted tonight to be special." Vivian, bless her heart, was gamely working her way through the salad despite clearly struggling with the taste. "It's certainly unique, dear." Luke had given up pretending to eat. "Sabrina, maybe the dressing separated or something. It tastes a little?" "A little what, honey?" "Just off." I tilted my head innocently. "That's strange. It tasted fine when I made it." The awkward silence stretched until Tom, ever the peacemaker, changed the subject to ask Luke about their current project at work. Luke answered in distracted monosyllables, clearly wondering what other culinary disasters awaited. When I cleared the salad plates, most of them were still half full. In the kitchen, I smiled to myself as I loaded them into the dishwasher. This was working perfectly. The bread rolls came out next, golden brown and beautiful. Everyone took one eagerly. Surely bread couldn't be ruined, right? Wrong. The first bites brought confused expressions all around. The rolls looked perfect but tasted like flavorless cardboard with a bitter aftertaste. "These are interesting," Evan said carefully, breaking his roll into smaller pieces as if that might improve the flavor. Luke took one bite and put his roll down entirely. "Sabrina, what recipe did you use for these?" "My grandmother's," I lied smoothly. "I wanted to try something traditional." Tom was still trying to eat his roll, washing each bite down with large gulps of wine. Rebecca had abandoned hers after one bite, her face pale. "Maybe we should move on to the main course," I suggested brightly. "I'm so excited for everyone to try the roast." I brought out the roast beef on a platter and it truly looked magnificent. Perfectly browned, garnished with fresh herbs, surrounded by colorful vegetables. Several people actually gasped appreciatively. "Now that looks like a work of art," Tom said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. I carved the roast at the table, giving everyone generous portions along with the carefully ruined vegetables. The meat looked juicy and perfect as I sliced it. Everyone took their first bites with obvious hope that this course would redeem the meal. It didn't. The roast was so tough it was almost inedible, and the marinade had made it incredibly salty with an unpleasant vinegary bite. The vegetables were either mushy or undercooked, seasoned with bitter herb combinations that made people's faces contort. This time, the reactions were impossible to hide. Tom actually made a small choking sound and reached for his water. Evan's usually jovial expression turned to one of polite confusion. Rebecca looked like she might be sick. But it was Luke's reaction that I was waiting for. His face went red as he chewed the tough, oversalted meat. I could see his temper rising with each terrible bite, could practically feel the embarrassment radiating off him. "Sabrina," he said, his voice tight with control, "this doesn't taste right either." "What do you mean?" "I followed the recipe exactly. The meat is..." He took another bite and winced. "It's really salty. And tough." "Maybe you're just not used to home cooking anymore," I said innocently. "You've been eating out so much lately with all those work dinners." Luke's fork clattered against his plate. "What's that supposed to mean?" The table went quiet. Everyone could feel the tension building, but they didn't understand what was happening. "Nothing, honey. I just know you've been working late a lot, eating at restaurants. I thought you might appreciate a home-cooked meal for once." "I appreciate it," Luke said through gritted teeth, "but something is clearly wrong with the food." Tom tried to lighten the mood. "Maybe it's just one of those nights where nothing goes according to plan. Happens to the best of cooks." But Luke was past the point of social niceties. The combination of terrible food, his parents' obvious discomfort, and his guilty conscience was making him lose control. "This is embarrassing," he muttered, pushing his plate away. "My parents come over for a nice dinner and this is what we serve them?" "Luke," Vivian said sharply, "that's enough." But Luke was spiraling. "No, it's not enough. This is supposed to be our chance to show everyone what a great family we are, and instead we're serving food that tastes like..." "Like what, Luke?" I asked quietly. He looked around the table at his parents' shocked faces, at Tom's obvious discomfort, at Rebecca who looked like she wanted to disappear. That's when he snapped. "You call this food?" he hissed, his voice dripping with disgust as he gestured at his plate. "My parents aren't strays, don't feed them scraps." The silence that followed was deafening. Vivian's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Evan's face went dark with anger. Tom looked like he'd been slapped. But I just smiled. "I didn't order this," I said quietly, my voice carrying clearly in the shocked silence. Luke's face went from red with anger to white with confusion. "What do you mean you didn't order?" I interrupted, standing slowly and placing both hands on the table. "I didn't order my husband to cheat on me while I'm carrying his child. I didn't order him to spend our baby's college fund on hotel rooms with his coworker. And I definitely didn't order him to humiliate me at every family gathering for the past 3 months." The words hung in the air like smoke. Rebecca's face went completely white. Tom's eyebrows shot up in confusion. Vivian gasped audibly. "Sabrina, what are you talking about?" Luke's voice cracked with panic. I reached under my chair and pulled out the manila envelope. "I'm talking about the Grand Plaza Hotel. October 15th, 18th, and 22nd. $350 each night." I slid the first receipt across the table toward his parents. Vivian picked it up with trembling hands. "I'm talking about Chez Laurent, where you took Rebecca for her birthday while I was home with morning sickness so bad I couldn't keep water down." Rebecca made a small sound like a wounded animal. Tom turned to stare at his wife, his face a mask of confusion. "This is insane," Luke stammered, half rising from his chair. "Sabrina, you're having some kind of breakdown. Pregnancy hormones. Sit down." The command came from his own father. Evan's voice was like ice. "Sit down and let her finish." Luke sank back into his chair, his face pale and sweating. I pulled out the first photograph and placed it gently on the table. It showed Luke and Rebecca in an intimate embrace outside the Marriott downtown, her hand tangled in his hair, his mouth pressed against her neck. Vivian made a sound like she'd been punched in the stomach. "Oh Luke, how could you?" Tom picked up the photograph with shaking hands, staring at the image of his wife kissing another man. "Rebecca?" His voice was barely a whisper. "What is this?" Rebecca burst into tears. "Tom, I can explain." "Can you?" Tom's voice was getting louder. "Can you really explain why my wife is kissing another man in a hotel parking lot?" "Tom, please." "How long?" Tom demanded, turning the photo over as if looking for answers. "How long has this been going on?" Luke tried one more desperate play. "Everyone just needs to calm down. This is all a misunderstanding." "Then explain this," I said, pulling out a bank statement and sliding it across to him. $8,000 from our baby's college fund. Gone. Spent on your affair." Vivian's tears were flowing freely now. "The college fund? Luke, your father and I contributed to that fund. We thought we were helping secure our grandchild's future." "You were?" I said gently. "You were giving your son money to wine and dine his mistress while his pregnant wife sat at home worried about our finances." I methodically laid out more evidence. Screenshots of text messages where Luke called me clueless, and their baby a mistake. Hotel receipts showing a pattern of infidelity going back months. Photos of Rebecca posting about expensive meals that matched our credit card statements. With each piece of evidence, Luke shrank further into his chair and Rebecca cried harder. But it was Tom's transformation that was most dramatic. The kind, cheerful elementary school teacher was disappearing, replaced by a man whose world had just shattered. 6 months, he said, looking at the timeline I'd laid out. "You've been cheating on me for 6 months. Tom, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." "Our anniversary," Tom continued, his voice growing stronger and angrier. "You were with him on our anniversary. You told me you were working late, but you were with him." Rebecca reached for Tom's hand, but he jerked away from her touch. "Don't," he said coldly. "Don't you dare touch me." Luke tried one last time to salvage the situation. "Look, everyone needs to just calm down and talk about this rationally." "Rationally?" Vivian's voice was shaking with fury as she stood up. You want to talk rationally about how you betrayed your pregnant wife and stole from your own child. Mom, please? No. Evan stood up too, his face harder than I'd ever seen it. Don't call me that. Not right now. He turned to me, his eyes gentle despite his obvious rage at his son. Sabrina, sweetheart, we are so sorry. So sorry. Mr. Johnson, you have nothing to apologize for. Yes, I do, he said firmly. I raised him better than this. And I promise you, Vivian and I will make sure you and our grandchild are taken care of, no matter what happens between you and Luke. Tom had stood up too, his face pale but determined. Rebecca, we're leaving. Now. Tom, wait, please let me explain. Now. His voice brooked no argument. We'll talk at home. If you can even call it that anymore. As Tom guided his sobbing wife toward the door, he paused next to my chair. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I'm sorry this happened to you and I'm sorry my wife was part of it. You didn't deserve this. Neither did you, Tom. He nodded once and left, Rebecca stumbling behind him still trying to apologize through her tears. Luke sat alone at the table, surrounded by the evidence of his betrayal, while his parents comforted the woman he tried to destroy. The perfect dinner I'd planned had done exactly what I'd hoped. It had exposed the truth and shown everyone exactly who Luke Henderson really was. I'll be staying at my sister's tonight, I announced, picking up my purse. Luke, I suggest you use the time to find a good lawyer. You're going to need one. As I walked toward the door, Vivian caught my arm gently. Sabrina, honey, whatever you need. Whatever you and the baby need. We're here for you. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Behind me, I could hear Luke finally breaking down, but I didn't turn around. I was done looking back. The silence in my sister Amanda's living room was broken only by the sound of rain against the windows and my occasional sniffles. I'd been sitting on her couch for 2 hours, telling her everything that had happened at dinner, while she listened with a mixture of horror and admiration. I can't believe you actually did it, Amanda said, shaking her head. The planning, the evidence, the perfect timing. It's like something out of a movie. It felt like a movie while it was happening, I admitted. Like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. My phone had been buzzing constantly since I'd left the house. 17 missed calls from Luke, 12 text messages, and several voicemails I hadn't listened to yet. Are you going to hear what he has to say? Amanda asked, nodding toward my phone. Eventually. But not tonight. Tonight I just want to sit here and process what just happened. As if on cue, my phone rang again. This time it wasn't Luke, it was Vivian. Sabrina, honey, are you all right? We've been so worried about you. I'm fine, Vivian. I'm staying with my sister tonight. Good. That's good. Her voice was thick with tears. Sweetheart, I need you to know that Evan and I are completely on your side. What Luke did, what he did is unforgivable. You don't have to choose sides, Vivian. He's your son. And you're carrying our grandchild. Your family too, and you're the one who was wronged here. She paused and I could hear her taking a shaky breath. We tried to talk to him after you left, but he just kept making excuses. Blaming you, blaming the pregnancy, saying he felt trapped. My heart clenched. Even now, even after being caught red-handed, Luke couldn't take responsibility for his choices. We told him he had 24 hours to figure out his priorities, Vivian continued. Either he commits to making this right with you, or he needs to move out of the house until the baby comes. We won't have you stressed during the remainder of your pregnancy. Vivian, you can't kick your son out of his own house. The house that we helped pay for? The house where our grandchild will be living? Yes, we absolutely can. And we will. After I hung up with Vivian, Amanda brought me a cup of tea and settled back on the couch. So what's the plan now? She asked. Divorce? I said without hesitation. There's no coming back from this. Even if I could forgive the cheating, I'll never be able to forgive him calling our baby a mistake. Never. Good. You deserve so much better than Luke Henderson. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, I saw it was from Tom Torres. This is Tom. I got your number from the work directory. I wanted to thank you for tonight. I know it must have been hard for you, but I needed to know the truth. If you're willing, I'd like to talk sometime about what we do next. Neither of us deserves what they did to us. Who's that? Amanda asked, seeing my expression. Rebecca's husband. He wants to talk about what happens next. Are you going to? I think so. He seems like a good person who got caught up in their mess just like I did. I spent the next hour returning calls from friends who had heard about the dinner disaster through the family grapevine. Luke's cousin Sarah called to offer her support. My friend Jenny from work called to see if I needed anything. Even my mother-in-law's sister called to tell me she was proud of me for standing up for myself. It seemed like the entire extended family network had heard about Luke's affair within hours of the dinner ending. Around midnight, I finally listened to Luke's voicemails. The first few were frantic apologies mixed with excuses. He was sorry, but I had to understand how trapped he'd been feeling. He loved me, but the pregnancy had changed everything. He wanted to work things out, but I had humiliated him in front of his family. The later messages were angrier. I had no right to air our private business in public. I had embarrassed him professionally by involving Rebecca's husband. I was using the pregnancy to manipulate his parents against him. The final message, left just an hour ago, was different. Sabrina, please call me back. I know you're angry and you have every right to be. But we need to talk about this like adults. About the baby, about our future. I made mistakes, but that doesn't mean we have to throw away everything we built together. Please. Please call me. He sounded broken, desperate. But it was too little, too late. I deleted all the messages without responding. The next morning brought more calls, but this time they were practical ones. Luke's friend Justin called to tell me that Luke had shown up at his apartment at 2 a.m., completely drunk and ranting about how I'd destroyed his life. Vivian called to let me know that Luke had indeed moved out of the house, and she'd already had the locks changed. The house keys are here whenever you're ready for them, she said. And Sabrina? We've already spoken to our lawyer about making sure you're protected during the divorce proceedings. Luke won't be able to hide assets or drain accounts. I also received a call from Patricia Chong, my private investigator. I heard through the grapevine that last night went according to plan, she said with a hint of amusement in her voice. Better than I could have hoped, I admitted. Good. Now, for the legal proceedings, you'll want to make sure all that evidence is properly documented for court. I can help you organize everything for your attorney. Patricia, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think I went too far? Exposing him like that in front of everyone? There was a pause before she answered. Mrs. Henderson, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've seen dozens of cheating spouses and I've watched their victims respond in all kinds of ways. Some people fall apart. Some people get revenge in destructive ways that hurt them more than their cheating partners. But what you did, you exposed the truth to the people who needed to know it, and you did it in a way that protected yourself and your child. You didn't key his car or empty his bank accounts or post his business on social media. You simply made sure that the people in his life knew who he really was. So you don't think I was wrong? I think you were strategic. And I think Luke Henderson got exactly what he deserved. By afternoon, I was ready to go back to the house. Amanda offered to come with me, but I needed to face this alone. The house felt different the moment I walked in. Quieter, but also somehow lighter. Luke's presence had been removed along with his belongings, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe freely in my own home. On the kitchen counter, Vivian had left a casserole with heating instructions, along with a note, for you and our grandbaby. You're not alone in this. I found myself walking through each room, seeing the space with new eyes. This was my house now. Mine and my baby's. The nursery we'd started decorating together would be finished by me alone, but that felt right somehow. My phone rang as I was standing in the nursery doorway, imagining how it would look when it was complete. The caller ID showed Tom Torres. Hi Tom. Hi Sabrina. I hope you don't mind me calling. I needed to talk to someone who understands what this feels like. I don't mind at all. How are you doing? I'm staying at my brother's place. Rebecca and we're getting divorced. I can't get past what she did. What they both did. I understand completely. The thing is, Tom continued, I keep thinking about how they made us look like fools. How they sat at that dinner table knowing what they'd been doing, letting us serve them food and wine while they shared this secret. That's exactly how I felt. Like I was the only person who didn't know what was really going on in my own marriage. How did you find the strength to expose them like that? Because right now I feel like I can barely function. I thought about his question carefully. I think I found strength in the anger. Not the hurt that just made me want to curl up and disappear. But the anger at being lied to, at having my future planned without my input, at having my money spent on someone else. That anger gave me energy. I'm angry too, Tom said quietly. I'm so angry I don't know what to do with it. Then use it. Use it to protect yourself in the divorce. Use it to build a better life without her. Use it to make sure she can't hurt you anymore. Sabrina? Yes. Thank you. For including me last night. I know it would have been easier to just confront Luke privately, but I needed to know the truth about Rebecca. You deserve to know, Tom. Just like I deserve to know. After we hung up, I made myself a cup of tea and sat in the nursery rocking chair that Vivian and Evan had bought. My baby was moving around actively as if sensing the changes in our life. "It's just you and me now, little one," I said, rubbing my belly. "But that's okay. We're going to be just fine." For the first time in months, I actually believed that was true. A week after the dinner, the reality of my new life was starting to sink in. I sat in my lawyer's office, signing papers that would officially end my marriage to Luke Henderson. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly straightforward, thanks to all the evidence I'd gathered. With documentation this thorough, my attorney, Maria Santos, explained, "Your husband's lawyer is advising him not to contest anything. He's agreed to give you the house, primary custody of the baby, and he'll pay child support. Frankly, he's lucky you're not asking for alimony." "I don't want his money for me," I said firmly. "But our child deserves financial support." Luke's betrayal had cost him more than just his marriage. Word of the affair had spread through his company, and HR had launched an investigation into his relationship with Rebecca. Apparently, it was against company policy for employees to have romantic relationships without disclosure, especially when it involved expense account abuse. Both Luke and Rebecca had been fired. Rebecca's marriage to Tom was ending too. I'd heard through Vivian that she'd moved back in with her parents and was looking for a new job in another city. Tom and I had talked several times over the past week, and I was surprised to find that his friendship was becoming important to me. We understood each other in a way that other people couldn't. We'd both been betrayed by the people we trusted most. "How are you holding up?" he asked during one of our phone conversations. "Better than I expected, honestly. I keep waiting for the heartbreak to hit, but mostly I just feel relieved." "I know exactly what you mean. Like a weight has been lifted." "Exactly. I don't have to wonder where Luke is or who he's with or whether he's lying to me. I know exactly where I stand now." "Rebecca came by yesterday to get more of her things," Tom said. "She wanted to talk, to explain herself. But what is there to explain? She chose to betray our marriage for months. There's no explanation that makes that okay." "Did she say anything about Luke?" "Just that she was sorry it all came out the way it did. Not sorry she did it, just sorry she got caught." "That sounds about right." The hardest part of the whole situation was dealing with Luke's attempts to contact me. He called daily, sent long emails, and even showed up at my sister's office trying to get her to convince me to talk to him. His messages had evolved from desperate apologies to anger to bargaining and back to apologies. He wanted to work things out for the baby's sake. He claimed he'd made a mistake, but that we could rebuild trust. I never responded to any of them. "You're being too kind," Amanda said one evening as we went through another batch of Luke's emails. "He cheated on you for months, called your baby a mistake, and humiliated you repeatedly. Now he wants you to feel sorry for him?" "I don't feel sorry for him," I said, deleting another unopened email. "But I don't want to waste energy hating him either. I just want him to be irrelevant to my life except for child support payments." The one bright spot in all of this was Luke's parents. Vivian and Evan had not only stood by me, they'd become my strongest support system. Vivian came by several times a week to check on me and help with preparations for the baby. Evan had quietly taken care of several house repairs that Luke had been putting off for months. "We're not just doing this because you're carrying our grandchild," Vivian had told me during one of her visits. "We're doing it because you're family and family takes care of each other. Even when your own son is the one who caused the problem? Especially then. Luke made his choices. Now he has to live with the consequences. But that doesn't mean you and the baby should suffer." 3 weeks after the dinner, I got a call that surprised me. "Mrs. Henderson? This is Detective Rodriguez with the police department. I'm calling about a harassment complaint that's been filed against you." My heart jumped. "What kind of harassment complaint?" "According to the complaint, you've been stalking and threatening a woman named Rebecca Torres. The complainant says you hired someone to follow her and that you've been making her life difficult since she lost her job." "Detective, I haven't had any contact with Rebecca Torres since the night I exposed her affair with my husband. I haven't called her, texted her, followed her, or threatened her in any way." "Can you prove that?" "I can show you my phone records, my credit card statements, anything you need. I've been focused on my divorce proceedings and preparing for my baby. Rebecca Torres has been the furthest thing from my mind." Detective Rodriguez paused. "Mrs. Henderson, would you be willing to come in and make a statement? Because frankly, this complaint doesn't match what we're hearing from other sources." When I arrived at the police station, Detective Rodriguez was waiting with a folder full of papers. "Mrs. Henderson, it turns out Rebecca Torres has been having some problems since she lost her job. Problems that have nothing to do with you. What kind of problems? Well, it seems her affair with your husband wasn't her first extramarital relationship. We've had 3 other women come forward saying she was involved with their husbands too. She's been using dating apps while married, meeting men at hotels, the whole 9 yards. I stared at him in shock. You mean Luke wasn't her only affair? Not even close. And when word got out about what happened at your dinner party, these other women started connecting the dots. They realized they'd all been lied to by the same person. So why did she file a complaint against me? Because you're the one who exposed her. In her mind, you're responsible for all the consequences she's facing. The job loss, the divorce, the fact that she's now known around town as a serial cheater. Detective Rodriguez leaned back in his chair. Mrs. Henderson, Rebecca Torres, is what we call a habitual manipulator. She spent years juggling multiple relationships, lying to everyone involved. Your dinner party didn't just expose one affair, it brought down her entire house of cards. Does Luke know about the other men? According to his statement when we interviewed him, no. He thought he was her only affair partner. Turns out he was just another mark. I left the police station feeling a strange mix of vindication and pity. Luke hadn't just destroyed our marriage for love, he'd destroyed it for a woman who was using him the same way she'd used multiple other men. When I got home, there was a message on my voicemail from Luke. Sabrina, I just found out about Rebecca. About the other men. I don't know what to say. I threw away our marriage for someone who was playing me the whole time. I know you probably don't care, but I needed you to know that I know how stupid I was. How much I lost. For the first time since the dinner party, I called him back. Luke? Sabrina. Oh God, thank you for calling me back. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. I called because I heard about Rebecca and the other men. I wanted to make sure you were okay. There was a long pause. You're asking if I'm okay? After everything I did to you? Luke, what you did was unforgivable. Our marriage is over, and that's never going to change. But despite everything, I don't want to see you completely destroyed. I don't know how to live with what I've done, he said quietly. I destroyed the best thing in my life for someone who didn't care about me at all. Then learn from it. Be a better person. Be a better father to our child than you were a husband to me. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? I thought about that question for a long moment. Luke, forgiveness isn't something you get to ask for. It's something I might choose to give someday for my own peace of mind. But even if I forgive you someday, it doesn't mean I'll trust you again or want you back. Those are different things. I understand. I hope someday I can prove to you that I'm better than the person who hurt you. Then prove it to yourself first. Get counseling. Figure out why you made the choices you made. And when our baby is born, be the father he deserves. After we hung up, I sat in the nursery rocking chair and tried to process the conversation. I didn't feel sorry for Luke, he'd made his choices and now he had to live with them. But I also didn't feel the burning anger I'd carried for weeks. Maybe this was what healing looked like. Not forgetting what happened, not taking him back, but letting go of the rage that had been consuming so much of my energy. I had bigger things to focus on now. In 3 months I would be a mother. I had a house to prepare, a life to build, and a future to create for my child and myself. Luke had made his choices. Now it was time for me to make mine. 2 months later, I was 8 months pregnant and finally starting to feel like myself again. The house had been transformed from the space I'd shared with Luke into something that was entirely mine and my baby's. I'd repainted the living room, rearranged furniture, and finished the nursery in soft greens and yellows. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks earlier. Luke had kept his word about not contesting anything, and I now owned the house outright. Child support was arranged through the court system, so I wouldn't have to deal with Luke directly about money. He'd moved to another city for a fresh start and a new job. We only communicated now through our lawyers about visitation arrangements after the baby was born. He would have supervised visits twice a month, which felt right to me. Our child deserved to know his father, but I wasn't ready for unsupervised time yet. Tom Torres had become one of my closest friends. He'd handled his own divorce with remarkable grace, and we developed an easy companionship built on shared experience and mutual respect. "How are you feeling about becoming a mom so soon?" he asked during one of our weekly coffee dates. Terrified and excited in equal measure, I admitted. I keep thinking about how I'll explain all this to him someday. About his father, about why we're not together. You'll tell him the truth, age appropriately. That sometimes people make choices that hurt the people they're supposed to love, but that doesn't mean he's not wanted or loved. Tom had a way of cutting through complicated emotions to find simple truths. It was probably what made him such a good teacher. "What about you? Any thoughts about dating again?" Tom laughed. Sabrina, it took me 30 years to trust someone enough to marry them the first time. Rebecca destroyed that trust pretty thoroughly. I'm thinking I'll focus on being the best uncle to your baby and the best teacher to my students for a while. That sounds like a good plan. What about you? Ever think about meeting someone new eventually? The question surprised me. Honestly? No. Right now I'm focused on preparing for this baby and building a life as a single mom. Romance is the last thing on my mind. That's probably healthy. Give yourself time to heal. My phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. Doctor called. Your blood pressure is perfect. Baby is measuring right on track. So proud of how well you're taking care of yourself and our grandbaby. Luke's parents had been incredible throughout the entire ordeal. They'd never once made excuses for their son's behavior, and they'd thrown themselves into preparing for their grandchild with enthusiasm that sometimes brought tears to my eyes. We know this isn't the way you wanted to become parents, Evan had told me recently. But we want you to know that this baby is going to be so loved. By you, by us, by Amanda, by all the people who matter. Sometimes I wonder if it's better this way, I'd admitted. At least I know my child won't grow up in a home where one parent is lying and cheating. That's a mature way to look at it. This baby is lucky to have you as a mother. As my due date approached, I found myself thinking less about Luke and more about the future I was creating. I decided to take a full year of maternity leave, using savings and freelance income to support us. The house was paid off, my support system was strong, and I felt more capable than I ever had in my marriage. One evening, as I was folding tiny baby clothes in the nursery, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Luke's number, which surprised me. We hadn't spoken directly in over a month. Sabrina? What is it, Luke? Is everything okay? I wanted to call before the baby comes. I know we agreed to communicate through lawyers, but I needed to say something. I waited, one hand on my belly where the baby was doing somersaults. I've been in counseling, he continued, like you suggested. And I'm starting to understand how selfish I was. How I blamed you and the pregnancy for my own choices. Okay. The thing is, I know I can't fix what I did. I know I can't earn your trust back or make up for the pain I caused. But I want you to know that I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of being this baby's father. Luke, the only person you need to prove anything to now is our child. I know. And I will. I promise you, Sabrina, I'm going to be better. For him, and because it's what I should have been all along. After we hung up, I sat in the rocking chair and thought about the conversation. Luke sounded different, humbler, more genuine. Maybe losing everything really had taught him something. But even if he became the perfect co-parent, it wouldn't change my decision. Our marriage was over and I was okay with that. More than okay, I was grateful. The woman who had planned that revenge dinner had been angry and hurt and focused on punishment. The woman sitting in this nursery now was focused on the future. I wasn't the same person who had been married to Luke Henderson, and I didn't want to be. A week before my due date, I had lunch with Patricia Chong, my private investigator. You look peaceful, she observed as we sat in a quiet cafe near my house. I feel peaceful. For the first time in almost a year. Any regrets about how you handled everything? I thought about the question seriously. No regrets about exposing the truth. Maybe a tiny regret about the dramatic dinner party presentation, but honestly, it worked. Everyone who needed to know the truth learned it all at once, and I didn't have to have 20 separate difficult conversations. And Luke? How do you feel about him now? Indifferent mostly. He's going to be my child's father, so I hope he becomes a better person. But he's not my problem to fix anymore. That's a healthy attitude. Patricia, can I ask you something? In all the cheating spouse cases you've handled, do any of the marriages actually survive? Some do. Usually when the cheating partner takes full responsibility, does the work to understand why they cheated, and the betrayed partner is able to rebuild trust. But it's rare and it takes years. I don't think I could have done it. Even if Luke had confessed and begged for forgiveness, I don't think I could have moved past it. That doesn't make you weak or unforgiving. It makes you honest about your own boundaries. Some betrayals are just too deep to come back from. As I drove home from lunch, I thought about boundaries. For most of my marriage, I hadn't even known I had them. I'd been so focused on being the perfect wife, the understanding partner, the supportive spouse, that I'd never asked myself what I needed or what I wouldn't accept. The affair had forced me to find those boundaries, and now I knew exactly where they were. I would never again accept being lied to, taken for granted, or treated as less than an equal partner in a relationship. If I ever chose to be in a relationship again, it would be as a complete person who knew her own worth. Not as someone desperately trying to please a partner who didn't value her. That night I went into labor. As I called Amanda to drive me to the hospital, I felt a surge of excitement mixed with determination. I was about to meet my child and I was going to be the best mother I could be. Luke's betrayal had broken my marriage, but it hadn't broken me. If anything, it had made me stronger. I was ready to be a single mother. I was ready for whatever came next. And for the first time since I'd found those hotel receipts months ago, I was genuinely excited about my future. 6 months later, I was standing in my kitchen at 7 in the morning, bouncing my son Samuel on my hip while trying to make coffee one-handed. He was a happy baby with Luke's dark hair and what I hoped was my stubborn streak. "Good morning, sunshine," I cooed to him as he grabbed for my coffee mug. "Sorry, that's Mama's fuel. You've got your own breakfast coming up." The house was messier than it had ever been when I was married, but it felt more like home. Sam's bouncy seat sat next to the kitchen table, his toys were scattered across the living room floor, and his laundry was in a permanent cycle of washing, drying, and folding. I'd returned to work part-time when Sam was 4 months old, taking on freelance UX design projects that I could do from home while he napped. It wasn't the career trajectory I'd planned, but it worked for our life. Vivian and Evan came by twice a week to spend time with Sam and help around the house. They'd never once made me feel like I was keeping their grandchild from them, even though Luke's visitation was still supervised and infrequent. "He looks more like you every day," Vivian had said during her last visit, holding Sam while he babbled at her. "He's got your curious eyes and your determined little chin." Luke had visited 3 times since Sam was born. The visits were awkward but civil, supervised by a court-appointed monitor in a neutral location. Luke seemed genuinely trying to connect with his son, but he was clearly struggling with the reality of being a part-time father. "He's beautiful, Sabrina," Luke had said during his last visit, watching Sam play with blocks on the floor. "You're doing an amazing job with him." "Thank you. I keep thinking about how different things could have been. If I hadn't been so stupid, so selfish." "Luke, we can't change the past. The only thing that matters now is what kind of father you choose to be going forward." He nodded, but I could see the regret weighing on him. Good. Maybe it would motivate him to be better. Tom had become Sam's unofficial uncle, stopping by once a week to help with projects around the house and to hold the baby while I took a long shower or ran errands alone. He'd bought Sam more books than any 6-month-old could possibly need and read to him in different silly voices that made Sam giggle. "You know," Tom said one evening as we sat on my front porch while Sam napped in his stroller, "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad that dinner happened." "Really? Even though it ended your marriage too?" "Especially because it ended my marriage. I was living a lie, Sabrina. Rebecca was cheating on me with multiple people, stealing from our joint accounts to fund her affairs, making me look like an idiot to everyone who knew the truth. At least now I know who I really married." "Do you ever miss her? The person you thought she was?" "Sometimes. But then I remember that the person I thought she was never really existed. She was playing a role just like she was playing a role with Luke and all those other men." Tom had thrown himself into his teaching and his hobbies since the divorce. He'd started a weekend program teaching underprivileged kids about gardening and seemed happier than I'd ever seen him. "What about you?" he asked. "Any thoughts about dating again?" It was a question people had started asking more frequently now that Sam was getting older and I seemed to have my life together. "Honestly, I can't imagine trusting someone enough to let them into our life right now. Sam and I have such a good rhythm and I'm not sure I want to disrupt that." "That makes sense. But maybe someday?" "Maybe someday. If I meet someone who adds value to our life instead of complicating it. Someone who loves Sam as much as he loves me. Someone who proves over time that he's trustworthy. Those are pretty high standards. After Luke? They should be." That weekend, Amanda came over to babysit so I could go to a new parent support group that met at the community center. I'd been hesitant to join support groups, felt too much like admitting I needed help, but my pediatrician had recommended it as a way to meet other parents and get out of the house. The group was smaller than I'd expected, 6 women and 2 men, all with babies between 3 and 18 months old. The facilitator was a cheerful woman named Carol whose own children were now teenagers. "Today we're talking about building community as single parents," Carol announced. "It can feel isolating raising children without a partner, but you're not alone." As we went around the circle sharing our stories, I was struck by how different everyone's circumstances were. Jennifer was a widow whose husband had died in a car accident when their daughter was 2 months old. Marcus was a single father raising his son after his ex-wife decided she wasn't ready for motherhood. Elena had used a sperm donor to have her baby after deciding she didn't want to wait for the right relationship. When it was my turn, I gave a brief version of my story, divorced after my ex-husband had an affair during my pregnancy. The hardest part, I admitted, is that I feel like I should be sadder about my marriage ending. But mostly I just feel free. That's completely normal, Carol assured me. Not all relationships should be mourned, especially ones that involved betrayal or disrespect. You're allowed to be happy about being single. After the meeting, I found myself walking to the parking lot with Marcus, the single father. Your story really resonated with me, he said. Not the cheating part, but the feeling of relief after a relationship ends. How do you mean? My ex decided she wasn't ready to be a mom when our son was 6 weeks old. Just packed up and left. For a while I felt like a failure, like I should have been able to make her want to stay. But after a few months, I realized that Caleb and I were better off without someone who didn't want to be there. Marcus was tall and lean with kind eyes and an easy smile. He worked as a nurse at the children's hospital, which explained his comfort level with babies and his obvious devotion to his son. How old is Caleb now? I asked. 14 months. Walking and getting into everything. What about Sam? 6 months. Still in the stage where I can put him down somewhere and expect him to stay in that general area. Enjoy that while it lasts, Marcus laughed. Once they're mobile, it's a whole different game. We talked for another few minutes about teething and sleep schedules and the challenge of grocery shopping with babies before saying goodbye. Driving home, I found myself thinking about Marcus. He seemed like a genuinely good person, devoted to his son and comfortable with himself. But the thought of dating even someone as seemingly nice as Marcus still felt overwhelming. I wasn't ready. Maybe I wouldn't be ready for a long time, and that was okay. When I got home, Sam was napping in Amanda's arms while she watched a movie. How was the group? She whispered. Good. Normal people with normal problems. It was nice to feel like part of a community. Meet anyone interesting? Amanda, I was there to talk about parenting challenges, not to find a date. I'm just saying you've been in mom mode for 6 months straight. It might be good for you to remember that you're also a woman who deserves companionship. I have companionship. I have you and Tom and Luke's parents and now maybe some new friends from the group. That's not the same thing as having someone who's building a life with you. After Amanda left, I sat in the nursery rocking chair with Sam, thinking about what she'd said. Did I want someone to build a life with? Or was I content with the life I'd built for myself and my son? Looking at Sam's peaceful face as he slept in my arms, I realized that I was genuinely happy for the first time in years. Not just content or getting by, but actually happy. Luke's affair had destroyed my marriage, but it had also freed me from a relationship that wasn't really working. I'd been so focused on being the perfect wife that I'd lost track of who I was as an individual. Now I knew exactly who I was. I was Sam's mother, a successful freelance designer, a homeowner, a woman with strong boundaries and clear priorities. I was someone who could plan and execute a perfect revenge dinner when necessary, but who could also choose forgiveness and moving forward when it served her better. If someday I met someone who wanted to join the life Sam and I had created, someone who proved over time that they were trustworthy and loving and committed, then maybe I'd consider it. But I wasn't waiting around for that to happen. I wasn't incomplete without a partner. I was whole exactly as I was. Sam stirred in my arms and opened his eyes, giving me one of his gummy smiles that never failed to make my heart melt. What do you think, baby boy? I whispered to him. Are we doing okay, just the two of us? He reached up and grabbed my finger with his tiny hand, holding on tight. That felt like a yes to me. Outside, it was getting dark, and I could hear the sounds of families in other houses, parents calling children in for dinner, dogs barking, cars pulling into driveways. I was part of a community now, but I was also perfectly content in my own little family of two. Luke had thought I was too focused on pregnancy to notice anything else. He'd been wrong about that, but he'd been right that I was focused on building a family. I just hadn't realized at the time that the family I was building wouldn't include him. Now, holding my son in the house that was completely ours, I couldn't imagine it any other way. The revenge was complete. The healing was ongoing. The future was wide open. And I was ready for all of it.